Ever get curious about those grand English estates? You know, the kind like you see in all those period dramas.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a sucker for those sprawling houses and lush gardens.
Well, today we're taking a trip back to 18th century England. We're heading to Kenwood House.
Kenwood House. What's the story there?
It's the home of a fascinating woman named Dido Elizabeth Belle.
Okay, Dido Elizabeth Belle. The name rings a bell. Isn't there a movie about her?
Yeah, there is. It sparked a lot of interest in her life, along with that incredible portrait of her.
Right, the one with her cousin.
Exactly. But we're going deeper than a movie biopic.
Love that. So where are we getting our info from?
Well, we found this amazing podcast episode that really delves into Dido's life.
Cool. A deep dive into a deep dive.
Haha, pretty much. And we've got some extra historical details, too, to help us paint a complete picture.
Ooh, intriguing. Lay it on me. Who is this Dido Elizabeth Belle?
Okay, picture this. It's 1761.
Okay. A British warship is sailing the Caribbean.
Okay, I'm seeing it. On board, an enslaved woman named Maria gives birth to a baby girl.
Wow. A baby girl born into slavery. Must have been a tough start to life.
It was. And the father, Sir John Lindsay.
Sir John Lindsay,
Yeah.
a high-ranking naval officer, right?
You got it. Now, he could have easily abandoned the child.
Yeah, I mean, it was a different time.
But instead, he makes a surprising decision. He brings her back to England.
He brings her back to England. Wow, that's pretty unexpected.
Right? And it gets even more interesting. He entrusts the child to his uncle,
His uncle. Okay, and who's this uncle?
William Murray, the Earl of Mansfield, and, wait for it, Lord Chief Justice of England.
Whoa. The Lord Chief Justice. That's like the top judge in the land.
Exactly. One of the most powerful men in England.
So this baby, this mixed-race child born into slavery, is suddenly under the care of this prominent figure.
You got it. And Lord Mansfield and his wife decide to do something truly remarkable. They raise Dido as their own.
As their own. Alongside their other niece, Lady Elizabeth Murray, right?
Exactly. So Dido goes from a life destined for hardship to a life of privilege and power.
That's a wild turn of events. Can you imagine the culture shock?
It's mind-blowing. Kenwood Estate, their home, was a world of grandeur and influence. Think lavish parties, intellectual discussions, and a constant stream of fascinating guests.
Not your average upbringing.
Not at all. Most people in that era, let alone a woman of mixed race, could only dream of such a life.
Yeah, she was living in a totally different world.
So we have this paradox, right? Dido is embraced by this powerful family. She's raised in this world of privilege. But she's also navigating a society deeply divided by race and social status.
Oh, absolutely. It's like she's caught between two worlds, a world of opulence and a world of prejudice.
Exactly. And the sources we have, they really paint a vivid picture of this contrast. We have this inventory of Kenwood. It lists everything, a music room, a school room, even a Japan room.
Ooh, a Japan room. That sounds fancy.
It was. Imagine Turkish rugs, fine china, oil paintings everywhere, not to mention these stunning gardens.
Like a scene out of a Jane Austen novel.
Right. But Dido's life was anything but a simple romance. She's navigating social expectations, racial prejudice, a world that really wasn't ready for someone like her.
Yeah, I bet there were whispers and judgments behind those fancy fans.
Oh, definitely. And we've got firsthand accounts from visitors to Kenwood. Like there's this guy, Thomas Hutchinson, an American loyalist. He was super meticulous about documenting the social scene.
Sounds like our kind of guy. A detail-oriented history buff.
Right. And we've got legal documents, personal letters, even financial records. They all give us these little glimpses into Dido's daily life.
It's amazing how these fragments from the past can create such a compelling story.
Totally. So let's dive into Dido's world at Kenwood. Let's explore how she navigated this complex life, the relationships she formed, and the legacy she left behind.
I'm ready. Let's uncover the hidden layers of Dido Elizabeth Belle's story.
Now, one of the most intriguing aspects of Dido's life is her relationship with her great-uncle, Lord Mansfield. Remember, he wasn't just any judge.
Right, he was the Lord Chief Justice. A big deal.
Exactly. And he presided over some of the most significant legal cases of the 18th century.
Cases that probably had major implications for Dido's life, too, I bet.
You're absolutely right. One case in particular stands out.
Okay, which one?
The Somerset case of 1772.
Somerset case. Okay, refreshing my memory here.
It was a landmark case that centered on the legality of slavery in England.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's huge.
So here's the setup. A slave named James Somerset had escaped.
He escaped.
Yeah. And his owner wanted to forcibly return him to the colonies.
Oh, man, that's a terrifying situation.
It was a major legal battle, and Lord Mansfield was the one to decide the case.
Oh, what happened?
He ruled in Somerset's favor.
He did.
Yeah, he declared that slavery had no legal basis in England.
Whoa. That's a massive decision. It basically challenged the entire institution of slavery.
It sent shockwaves through British society. Imagine the implications. It challenged the economy, the social fabric, everything.
It's hard to overstate the impact of that ruling.
And here's where things get really interesting. Some historians speculate that Dido's presence in Lord Mansfield's life might have influenced his decision.
Oh, really?
We don't have direct evidence of Dido's thoughts on slavery, but it's fascinating to consider. Imagine growing up as a mixed-race woman in his household. Wouldn't that shape his worldview?
I mean, it's impossible to say for sure, but it's definitely an intriguing thought.
Right. It's a testament to how personal relationships can intersect with major historical events.
Yeah, history isn't just about big events. It's about the people who lived through them.
Absolutely. But we also can't forget that this was still a time of profound racial prejudice. Even within Kenwood, Dido faced challenges.
Right. I bet it was a constant balancing act for her.
Exactly. We get these insights from visitors like Thomas Hutchinson. He noted that Dido was often called upon by Lord Mansfield for various tasks.
Tasks? Like what kind of tasks?
Overseeing the dairy, poultry, things like that.
That's interesting. So she was part of the family, but also treated differently.
It really highlights the blurred lines she was navigating. Family member, but maybe also a degree of servitude. It's tough to say.
Yeah, there must have been so many unspoken expectations.
And remember, this is a time when even the slightest deviation from social norms could spark rumors and gossip.
Oh, for sure. Back then, whispers traveled faster than news.
And Lord Mansfield was a powerful abolitionist figure. His enemies would have loved to discredit him.
So did they try to use Dido to do that?
There were definitely rumors. Some people suggested that she was the real force behind his stance on slavery.
Oh, wow. So they were trying to paint her as some kind of manipulator.
It's crazy, right? One account mentions a Jamaican planter who joked that Lord Mansfield keeps a black in his house which governs him and his whole family.
Yikes. That's incredibly demeaning.
It is. And it shows how Dido, despite her limited public role, became entangled in these major social and political issues.
It's like she was a symbol, whether she wanted to be or not.
Exactly. And that's what makes her story so compelling. We have to piece together these fragments, these observations from others, and try to imagine what it was truly like to be her.
Yeah. It's like we're detectives trying to reconstruct her life from these scattered clues.
And speaking of clues, let's talk about that famous portrait of Dido and Elizabeth. It's the image that really sparked a lot of the renewed interest in Dido's life.
Yeah, it's such a striking image.
And fashion historians have been analyzing it in detail.
What have they found?
Well, they believe it's actually from an earlier date than we initially thought.
Really?
Yeah. They point to things like Elizabeth's childhood apron and the style of their hair. It suggests the portrait was likely painted in the 1760s, when they were just girls, maybe 10 years old.
So they grew up together, practically like sisters.
It seems that way. Now imagine this picture. Two young girls posing in this lush garden, St. Paul's Cathedral in the background.
Okay, I can picture it.
Elizabeth, she's in this frilly pink dress, the picture of childhood innocence. And then there's Dido,
What's she wearing?
his vibrant silk wrap and turban. But here's what's really striking. She's not depicted as a servant or in any way subservient.
Really? That's unusual for the time.
It is. She's presented as Elizabeth's equal, which is incredibly rare for a portrayal of a mixed-race woman in 18th century England.
So what does that tell us about how Dido was perceived within the Mansfield household?
It suggests that she was viewed with affection, respect, at least within that social circle. It makes you wonder what was going through their minds as they sat for that portrait.
Did they have any idea that centuries later we'd be scrutinizing this image, trying to piece together their lives?
It's mind-blowing, isn't it? This seemingly ordinary moment captured for eternity, and now it's a window into this forgotten past.
It's a reminder that every detail, every image can hold so much meaning. And sometimes it takes a fresh perspective to uncover those hidden layers.
Exactly. And that's what we're doing here today. We're piecing together the puzzle of Dido's life, using every detail we can find.
And it's a puzzle that's still being assembled. As new research emerges, our understanding of her continues to evolve.
It's a never-ending process of discovery. And that's what makes history so fascinating. Before the break, we were talking about how Dido was treated at Kenwood, part of the family, but also facing those limitations because of her race.
Yeah, it was a complicated situation for sure, and it seems like different sources paint different pictures of her role there.
That's true. Like we mentioned, Thomas Hutchinson seemed to focus on those tasks, you know, overseeing the dairy and poultry.
Right, like those were her main duties. But then we see Lord Mansfield treating her with so much affection, so much respect.
Exactly. And don't forget how he kept updating his will, always making sure she was provided for, even specifying that he wanted to give her more.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. That speaks volumes. It wasn't just about the money, though. He involved her in his work, too, had her writing letters for him.
And she had beautiful handwriting, elegant and clear.
Really shows you how capable she was. They obviously valued her intelligence and her company.
No doubt about it. But still, societal norms, they cast a long shadow. You can't just ignore them.
Especially back then, people were always watching, always judging.
Oh, absolutely. And remember, Hutchinson, he even implied Dido might be having an affair with Lord Mansfield.
Seriously. That's a bit far-fetched, isn't it? I mean, considering the age difference in their family bond.
Yeah, it seems pretty outlandish. My guess is Hutchinson was projecting his own discomfort with the whole situation.
Makes sense. He was a staunch traditionalist, right? A loyalist to the crown, exiled after the Boston Tea Party. Seeing a mixed-race woman treated with such respect by a prominent judge.
Probably challenged his whole worldview. And let's not forget, rumors spread like wildfire back then.
Oh yeah, gossip was the social media of the 18th century.
Exactly. And Lord Mansfield, he was a powerful figure, advocating for abolition. Plenty people wanted to take him down a notch.
So did they use Dido to try and discredit him?
Absolutely. They suggested she was the driving force behind his stance on slavery, like he was being manipulated or something.
Oh wow, trying to turn her into some kind of villain.
There's this one account that really gets me. A Jamaican planter supposedly joked that Lord Mansfield keeps a black in his house which governs him and his whole family.
That's awful. So demeaning.
It really is. But it highlights how Dido, even without actively seeking it, became a symbol. She was entangled in these huge political and social issues of the day.
Even though we don't have her own words to tell us her perspective.
Exactly. It's all these bits and pieces, these observations from others. And we have to use them to try and imagine what it was like to walk in her shoes.
Trying to understand her reality through these little glimpses we get.
Speaking of glimpses, let's get back to that famous portrait of Dido and Elizabeth. It's what really sparked a lot of the renewed interest in Dido's life.
It's such an iconic image. I remember seeing it for the first time and just being captivated.
And the fashion historians, they've been poring over it. They think it's actually from an earlier date than we originally thought.
Oh, really? How can they tell?
Well, it's all in the details. Elizabeth's wearing a childhood apron, their hairstyles. All those little things point to the 1760s, when they're about 10 years old.
So they really did grow up together, practically as sisters.
Imagine them posing in that beautiful garden at Kenwood, St. Paul's Cathedral in the background.
It must have been a lovely day.
Elizabeth in her pink dress, Dido in a vibrant silk wrap and turban. But here's the key thing. She's not portrayed as a servant, not in any way subservient.
That's a powerful statement for the time.
It really is. She's presented as Elizabeth's equal. In 18th century England, that's a big deal, especially for a portrayal of a mixed-race woman.
It makes you think, how was she really viewed within the Mansfield family?
Clearly, with affection and respect. I mean, the artist wouldn't have portrayed her like that otherwise.
Right. It makes you wonder if they ever imagined centuries later we'd be analyzing this image, using it to understand their lives.
It's mind-blowing, isn't it? A single moment captured in time, and now it's a portal to this hidden past.
We're constantly reinterpreting history, aren't we? Finding new meaning in these old images and objects.
And Dido's story, it's a perfect example of that. We're taking these fragments, these clues, and trying to build a more complete picture of this extraordinary woman.
A puzzle that's still being put together. Each new piece of research gives us a little more insight.
It's a never-ending process of discovery, and that's what makes history so exciting. So after Lady Mansfield died and Elizabeth got married, what happened to Dido?
Well, she stayed at Kenwood for a while. Lord Mansfield, he wasn't alone. Two of his other nieces were living with him, too.
And we actually get a glimpse into Dido's daily life during that time, thanks to an accounting book kept by one of her cousins, Lady Anne.
Oh, really? What kind of things were in the book?
Everyday expenses, Dido's quarterly allowance, her clothing, even the cost of having her teeth extracted.
Ouch. How much did that set her back?
5 shillings per tooth.
Wow. It's funny how these little details, they really bring us closer to her life, don't they?
They do. You know, we even learned that when she was sick, they gave her ass's milk.
Ass's milk. I've never heard of that.
It was considered a luxury tonic back then. Really shows you that Although Dido didn't live in extravagant luxury like Elizabeth, she was still cared for, had access to good health care.
Which was a privilege in itself back then, especially for a woman of color.
Definitely. But her life was about to change dramatically. Lord Mansfield, he passed away in 1793.
So what happened to Dido?
Well, in his will, he left her a considerable sum of money, ensured her financial independence.
Wow, so she was finally free to make her own choices.
Exactly. And what she does next is truly remarkable. So Dido's got this newfound freedom, a good amount of money, and a world of possibilities ahead of her. What does she do?
She takes a bold step. December 1793, just a few months after Lord Mansfield's death, she gets married.
Married. That's exciting. Who's the lucky guy?
A man named John Dynear.
John Dynear. Okay, tell me more about him.
Well, he had been a valet for a politician.
A valet. That's interesting. So her social circle shifts quite a bit.
It's a pretty significant change from the aristocratic world she grew up in.
Makes you think she really wanted a break from all that, maybe.
It's possible. And there's another interesting detail. Around this time, she changes her last name.
She does. From Belle to Dynear.
Exactly. It's like she's solidifying that break, from the Mansfield family and her past.
It's a powerful statement. She's creating her own identity.
Belle, remember, it was a version of her father's pseudonym. It meant beautiful in French.
Right.
Taking her husband's name, it's like she's saying, this is who I am now.
She's making her own choices.
Yeah.
Building her own life. I love that. So what do we know about their life together? Where did they settle?
They found a place in Pimlico.
Pimlico.
It was a pretty middle-class area of London back then. Tax documents describe their house as very pleasantly situated with a nice big garden.
Not quite Kenwood Estate.
Definitely not, but it was their own.
And they had children.
3 sons, Charles, John, and William.
A family of her own. It's heartwarming. It must have been quite a change from the life she knew at Kenwood.
I imagine it was a lot more simple, more focused on family.
Maybe it's a sense of normalcy that she hadn't really experienced before.
But sadly, this chapter of her life was pretty short. Dido died in 1804.
Oh no. How old was she?
Only 43. We don't know the exact cause, but it reminds you how fragile life was back then.
Such a heartbreaking end to a story that's so full of triumph and tragedy. Dido defied those societal expectations, navigated those complex social circles.
And she created her own space in a world that wasn't always welcoming.
For so long, her story was lost to history. Then, that incredible portrait, the one of her and Elizabeth, resurfaces.
Yeah, it was like a window into this forgotten world.
It sparked so much curiosity. People wanted to know, who is this woman? Amazing how a single image can do that.
Dido's story resonates today because it challenges how we think about history. It makes us confront those issues of race, class, gender.
It's a reminder that history isn't just about kings and queens. It's about ordinary people who made extraordinary choices.
Dido might not have had political power or fame, but her story speaks to that human desire for freedom, that resilience in the face of adversity.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Dido's life, I'm in awe of her. What about you? What stands out the most?
It's her agency, the choices she made, embracing her heritage, forming bonds across social divides, creating a life that reflected her values.
Beautifully said. Dido Elizabeth Belle's story reminds us that history is full of these untold stories, these hidden figures waiting to be rediscovered.
If you're intrigued, keep exploring. There are books, historical documents, so many perspectives to consider.
Exactly. History is an ongoing conversation, a constant process of discovery. Thanks to figures like Dido, that conversation becomes richer, more human. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Make sure to subscribe to the Deep Dives for more explorations into history and the fascinating stories that shape our world. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep diving deep.